American Psycho is a gay story about a gay man struggling to come to terms with just how gay he is. Here's why. That was a copy of Fight Club, but same difference. Now, of course, you can't come onto the internet and make outrageous statements without any evidence whatsoever to back them up. So to give my insane ramblings a little bit of credibility, I'm going to be looking at both textual and non-textual evidence to support my arguments. Non-textual evidence is pretty self-explanatory. It's things like aspects of the author's personal life that may influence how they wrote their work. For example, Tolkien fought in World War I. This affects the way that he writes about male friendships formed under great stress. Someone in the comments tells me that Tolkien hated allegory being applied to his work, like I didn't already know that, and I show up at their home address. But this kind of evidence can be difficult to find. Maybe a still alive author is very private about their personal life, or maybe the clues in the text are vague enough that it can lead to hours and hours of debate on the brain-rotting social media app of your choice. I'd like to thank you for choosing this one today. Professional academics can devote years of their careers to finding out what the author meant by that. They can publish countless articles, trawl through archives for even the slightest piece of information that might send them in the right direction. And sometimes the author publicly comes out as gay and says, American Psycho is about my life and experiences, I am Patrick Bateman. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe, I've linked my Patreon in the description. Although, interestingly enough, Bret Easton Ellis, the author of American Psycho, previously avoided consistently labelling himself as one sexuality, believing that it would change the way his work was interpreted. He specifically says that if people knew he was gay, they would read Psycho differently. Which is true, but also him continuing to be non-committal about his sexuality would change how people read the book, just as if he wasn't American it would change how people read the book, or if he wasn't a psycho. But he is American, and therefore the psycho part is just kind of implied. British psycho be like, I've got reservations at Greg's. Why am I doing an impression of my own accent? Okay, anyway, my point is that people interpret the things we do and say in everyday life based on what they know about us, and that applies to works of art too, whether we want it to or not. And in fact, Bret being so non-committal about both his sexuality and whether Patrick Bateman is based on himself over the years kind of adds fuel to the interpretation that Patrick's thoughts and feelings are Bret's own thoughts and feelings. It's only slightly less compelling evidence than the part where, again, he told everyone that Patrick's thoughts and feelings were his feelings. Which means that American Psycho can be pretty easily interpreted as the story of a gay man struggling to conform to a heterosexual society while keeping his sexuality a secret, both in the book and the film. Intentionally or not, the film adaptation arguably pushes this part of the original book to the forefront, and hoo boy do I love arguing. So today we are going to be looking at the film adaptation because I hate books and I can't read anyway. If you can't read either, then leave a comment saying, well, whatever the hell you like, I guess. It's not like I'm going to know what it says. Now that we've covered non-textual evidence, we need to move on to textual evidence. We're looking for aspects of the script and direction which suggest that the movie has an association between Patrick and homosexuality on its mind. But those can be pretty hard to identify. I mean, it's not like, I don't know, the first thing said about Patrick in the entire film is a gay joke.
Why aren't we doors yet? Because Bateman won't give the maitre d' head.
Okay, but it's not like the movie constantly emphasizes the homophobic nature of the environment which Patrick is in through the words and actions of his peers and Patrick himself.
Oyster bar. Come on, let's get a res.
With a dog.
That isn't a
The next stall thinks it's okay.
We have to encourage a return to traditional moral values.
Guys, I'm trying to make a video that's over 2 minutes long here. You've got to give me some ambiguity. Sure, I'll hold. So Patrick's whole deal is that he wants to fit in with his high-flying investment banker colleagues, but in order to do so, he's had to turn himself into an emotionless husk of a man, denying himself anything that he actually wants to do and spending his whole life putting on a performance as someone he's not. As he tells us himself,
But there is no real me, only an entity, something illusory. I simply am not there.
And he is rewarded for this constant, all-encompassing lie because he lives in a culture where lies like that are expected. He lies about getting reservations at an exclusive restaurant. He lies to his fiancée that he wants to marry her while he's actually off having an affair with another colleague's fiancée. And he of course lies to Willem Dafoe about whether or not he took Jared Leto back to his apartment and carved him up with an axe. And this is the one lie that weighs the heaviest on Patrick, the greatest deception that could bring the whole facade crashing down. This is where we get into the main metaphorical thrust here, extreme violence against someone being a metaphor for having disconnected, emotionless sex with them. I talked about this in a bit more depth in my Fight Club video, but in short, gay people of Bret Easton Ellis' generation would have developed a strong association between being gay and violence and death, bearing witness to events like the Stonewall riots and the AIDS crisis. American Psycho is set in the 1980s, where that crisis was being exacerbated by the policies of Ronald Reagan, those policies mostly being some variation of didn't ask. It was still seen then pretty much exclusively as a gay disease that only gay men could contract, and this is at the forefront of Patrick's mind. The idea that being intimate with a man is an inherently violent act that will likely lead to death and other devastating consequences if either Detective Willem or his homophobic co-workers found out about it. Also consider that when he murders Paul Allen, he does it out of a genuine hatred for a pretty irritating guy, and he does it very easily with not a huge amount of remorse coming from it, at least initially. But when he tries to murder Lewis, another co-worker, in a public bathroom, he is met with genuine affection from a man for the first and only time in the movie, and it's what truly starts him off on his downward spiral. Again, from the metaphorical standpoint of murder as sex, Bateman has been having such emotionally disconnected sexual encounters with men that the biggest reveal in the film is that he may not have been with Paul Allen that night at all. Lewis, meanwhile, is the only man in this world that cares about the people he sees every day beyond a surface level. In that eternally memed business card scene, he's the only one who notices that Patrick is sweating and asks if he's okay. Lewis also has the courage to do something that Patrick can't: be himself. Sure, he's not doing anything revolutionary, he just dresses a little differently, has a different haircut, and outwardly behaves a little bit less hyper-masculine than everyone else. But for someone like Patrick, who's so obsessed with conformity as a way to hide the true self, it's enough to make Lewis a figure of both intense jealousy and intense desire for him. You could even take it a bit further and say that Patrick is having a dispassionate affair with Lewis's fiancée because it's the closest he can get as a closeted man to actually having sex with Lewis. But that would be a bit gay, and obviously Patrick is the straightest man alive. That's why he has a Les Mis poster in his bathroom. I mean, are you kidding me? This all leads us quite nicely to examining how Patrick Bateman treats women. Badly. He ignores and publicly berates his fiancée, who I somehow always manage to forget is played by Reese Witherspoon, of all people. He doesn't seem interested in actually getting to know Lewis's fiancée on any deeper level, and he horrifically abuses and murders the as he hires. In fact, let's play a fun game called Examining the Thematic Roles of the Women Patrick Hires to do with without YouTube demonetizing me. The difficulty is set to Nightmare. On 2 separate occasions, Patrick has sex with women that he has hired for that purpose. The first time, both women are and the second time is with just one of those women and another woman who is a friend of his. The first time, he films an adult video with the women while coldly giving them instructions like a film director. His manner has a distinct lack of, I'm trying to think of an academic way to say this, but long story short, he just doesn't seem here at all. He only speaks to these women as afterthoughts while he monologues about Phil Collins. At times, it seems like he's irritated by them just being there. In another famous bit of the movie where he's actually joining in, he stares at himself in the mirror the whole time, preferring to admire the male form over either of the women that he's having sex with. Me when I'm straight, am I right, fellas? Plus, his making of the adult film in the first place feels like 1, a very self-conscious attempt to do something that Patrick believes manly men do with women, and 2, an attempt to refute to himself that he couldn't possibly be gay, because look, here's physical evidence of me doing the least homosexual thing possible. It just doesn't make sense. I also wish to point out to you that in the second encounter, Patrick monologues about another album instead of showing any reaction at all to the 2 women getting intimate right in front of him. In fact, he nearly starts crying while he waxes poetically about Whitney Houston. Let me just say that for you one more time. The only positive emotion that Patrick Bateman shows, which isn't a facade of some kind, is while he is monologuing about a Whitney Houston album. Straight men do this all the time, Your Honor. It's very common. But despite his long history of killing and murdering the women he sleeps with, he is unable to kill his secretary Jean when she comes over to his apartment one evening. In fact, Jean is the only woman, arguably the only person at all, who Patrick treats with anything kinder than a vague contempt. Patrick knows that she is in love with him and initially invites her over, hoping to exploit this into a quick murder. Again, don't make me tap the sign. But when she actually gets there after he's interrupted by an answering machine message from his fiancée, he's unable to follow through. He tells her, which, yes, obviously may perhaps allude to the fact that he was just about to get the round-winning kill cam on her a few minutes ago, but I think this whole exchange between them can be read as a gay man wishing that he had quote-unquote normal desires so that he could give a woman who is in love with him an emotionally satisfying romantic relationship. It's a direct parallel with the bathroom scene, Patrick believing that the immutable nature of who he is makes him despicable and undeserving of happiness. And this little heart-to-heart with Jean leads to the other final and greatest tragedy of Patrick's life. Because at the end of the movie, he's finally no longer denying who he is. He hates himself for being like that, but he has on some level accepted his base natures and desires as immutable. He tearfully confesses to his lawyer's answering machine about all his murders in a way that definitely echoes a very emotional coming out. And he is met with nothing. His fate is one that, for him, is arguably worse than being persecuted for what he is. Being ignored. His lawyer thinks that the entire confession was a joke, and when Patrick insists that he's not joking, the lawyer just doubles down, telling him point blank that the truth is impossible. Patrick finally worked up the courage to bare his soul, and nobody cares. He has essentially succeeded at what he was trying to do with that adult film. Patrick Bateman can't be gay. There's just so much evidence to the contrary that even his own confession isn't enough to overcome the weight of that evidence which he spent his entire life building up. At least being hated by his peers for what he was would be some kind of validation, a confirmation that what he thinks and feels are real, part of a fully formed and authentic identity. But instead, the movie ends with Patrick sat in front of a sign telling us this is not an exit. He's returned to his heterosexual peers, to the mask that he was putting on before, and he knows now, more than ever, that it can't help him any longer. He was a man in a world of lies who finally decided to tell the truth, but he's too good of a liar for anyone to believe him, and it's trapped him in a purgatory of his own making. One where the times he chose to try and fight back against heterosexual expectations keeping him trapped and driving him insane may not have happened at all. One where the brief moments of connection he did find with potentially kindred spirits only left him feeling more alone than before. One where despite his best efforts to be himself whatever the consequences, he's faced with the crushing realization that no matter what he does, no matter how loud he screams for freedom, to the self-obsessed homophobic sociopaths that he has locked himself in with, the real Patrick Bateman is still, after all this time, simply not there. Wow. I guess it just goes to show that no matter how unique you try to be in a violently capitalist society, it's all for naught. Money truly is the root of all evil. Anyway, I have a Patreon now. For less than the price of a cup of coffee per month, you'll get access to exclusive behind-the-scenes posts, video scripts, unhinged rants about film and TV that you won't find anywhere else, and more. And you'll also get my eternal gratitude for supporting the channel and enabling me to put more time and resources into these videos. I'm really committed to upping the quality this year, and your support could help me do that. And yes, I will make another Doctor Who video eventually. Please stop asking. With that said, thank you for watching the video, and bye. Love ya. As a friend, I've been hurt too many times.